I was a 72-year-old retired engineer, the kind of man who saved every receipt, labeled every jar in the pantry, and double-checked every lock at night. My life had always been about control and order, until my grandson thought he could outsmart me. It all began one quiet afternoon when I reached for my safe deposit key on the hook in my study. Something felt off. The key looked the same, but it sat a tiny bit crooked, and when I picked it up, the weight was just a hair lighter. Not enough for most folks to notice, but I'd handled that key for decades. I knew it like the back of my hand. My grandson, who'd moved in with me a few months back after dropping out of college, had been hanging around my study more than usual. He'd pretend to look for books or ask about old photos, but his eyes always wandered to that key hook. I didn't say a word, didn't accuse him. Instead, I hung the key back up and walked away like nothing happened. See, I'd been expecting something like this. The boy had a sneaky streak, and I'd seen hints of it before. Little lies about where he'd been, money disappearing from his mom's purse when he visited her. But this? Swapping my key? That was bold. I sat in my armchair that evening, sipping black coffee, thinking it through. If he'd swapped it, he probably had a duplicate made, planning to get into my safe deposit box at the bank. He figured I was old and forgetful, that I wouldn't catch on. But oh, he was wrong. I'd cleared out the real valuables years ago. War bonds, land deeds, gold coins, all safe in a trust no one knew about. What was in that box now? Nothing but trouble for him. Papers that would bite back hard. As the sun set, I heard him humming in the kitchen, acting all innocent. I smiled to myself. Let him think he'd pulled it off. Sometimes the best way to catch a thief is to let him steal the trap. What he didn't know was that I'd been waiting for him to make his move. A week dragged by, and I kept my eyes open without letting on. My grandson seemed more relaxed, like he'd gotten away with something big. But then, one evening, I overheard him in the garage. I was heading out to check the mailbox when his voice floated through the thin wooden door, low and cocky, like he was king of the world. "Yeah, man, I'll have access soon," he said. "The old guy's slippin'. He didn't even notice the swap." I froze, my hand on the doorknob, ear pressed close. The person on the other end laughed, a rough sound, and mentioned retirement money and cashing in big time. My jaw tightened so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Retirement money. That boy had no idea what he was messing with. I'd worked 40 years in engineering, building bridges and fixing machines, saving every penny. But he thought he could just dip in like it was his piggy bank. I didn't burst in. No, I slipped back inside the house, quiet as a mouse. Let him brag, let him plot, my blood boiled, but I kept cool. See, anger makes folks sloppy, and I wasn't about to be sloppy. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. The trap was set, and he was walking right into it. That phone call? It was just more rope for him to hang himself with. The next morning, he acted normal, offering to mow the lawn like a good boy. I nodded, smiled, and said thanks. Inside, though, I was mapping it all out. He'd make his move soon, and when he did, I'd be ready. And soon, he'd step right into it. The truth hit me like a freight train as I sat in my study, staring at that swapped key. Back in the day, that safe deposit box held my life savings. War bonds from my time in the service, deeds to a couple of properties I'd bought cheap after the war, even a handful of gold coins passed down from my father. I'd built that nest egg with sweat and smarts, engineering my way through tough jobs to secure a future. But 3 years ago, after noticing my grandson's sticky fingers during family visits, I got wise. I transferred everything to a rock-solid trust, hidden away where no one could touch it without my say-so. Now, what lurked in that box wasn't treasure. It was a ticking bomb. folders stuffed with evidence I'd gathered quietly over the years. Photos of him lifting cash from his mom's wallet, receipts from pawn shops where he'd hawked family heirlooms, even screenshots of shady texts to his buddies about quick scams. I'd pieced it together like a puzzle, each bit proving his greed and lies. He thought he was after easy money, but if he cracked that box open, he'd be staring at his own undoing. I'd let him walk right into it, watch him destroy himself with those greedy hands. I leaned back in my chair, the room dim with evening light. The house was quiet, but tension hummed like a live wire. He'd make his grab soon, I could feel it. The only question was how long it would take before he grabbed the bait. I played dumb like a pro, hanging that fake key back up and going about my days as if nothing was amiss. But behind the scenes, I turned into a one-man surveillance operation. As a retired engineer, I'd always lived by precision, measuring twice, cutting once. Now that habit became my weapon. I started a little notebook, hidden in my sock drawer, jotting down every move he made. Time he left the house, 8:45 a.m. Back at 11:12 a.m., looking shifty. Nights he vanished after dinner, claiming friends, gone till 2 a.m. Even noted when he showered extra long, probably washing off guilt. It was like building a bridge, every detail a beam, strengthening my case. I didn't miss a thing. Precision was my shield against his chaos, and my sword to strike back. He thought he was the clever hunter, stalking my supposed fortune. But oh, how the tables turn. I was the one laying the trap, wires taut and ready to snap. Out of the blue, my grandson invited me to lunch one sunny afternoon. It struck me as odd, because he usually dodged spending time with me like I was yesterday's news. We ended up at this old diner downtown, the kind with vinyl booths and waitresses who call you Hun. He ordered a burger, all smiles, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. Midway through, he leaned in casual-like and asked about my old-fashioned safe deposit box at the bank. Said he was curious about how folks stored stuff back in the day. I stirred my black coffee real slow, pretending to rack my brain. Which branch was it again? Chase? No, wait, maybe Wells Fargo? Getting fuzzy in my old age, I mumbled, watching his eyes light up like he'd hit the jackpot. He grinned too wide, nodding along, thinking I was losing my grip. Poor kid. He figured he could pump me for info without raising flags. But while he chomped on fries, I sat there calm as a pond, knowing I'd been weaving this web for ages. That noose around his neck, I'd been tightening it thread by thread. As we paid the bill, he patted my shoulder, all grandsonly affection. I smiled back, but inside I chuckled. He was playing checkers. I was on chess level 10. Little did he know I'd been sharpening that noose for years. That night, around 2:17 a.m., a soft creak yanked me from sleep. It was my study door easing open. I didn't budge from bed, but cracked my eyes just enough to see through the hallway glow. There was my grandson's shadow, long and sneaky, flashlight beam dancing like a firefly. He slipped inside, quiet as a thief, which he was, and started rummaging through my desk drawers. Papers rustled, locks clicked softly, but he found zilch. I'd cleared out anything worth a dime years back, stashing it where even a bloodhound couldn't sniff it. He muttered curses under his breath, frustration bubbling up like soda fizz. I watched his reflection in the dark window across the hall, fighting back a laugh that nearly escaped. Here he was, thinking he'd uncover some hidden map to my fortune, but all he got was dust and old receipts, like a fox raiding an empty henhouse. He finally gave up, slipping out and closing the door with a sigh. I lay there, heart pounding with that sweet suspense, knowing this was just him nibbling at the bait. Morning came, and he acted normal over breakfast, but his eyes darted. He thought the study held the big secret. He thought the study was the prize, but the real prize would crush him. What my grandson didn't know was that I'd rigged up a tiny motion camera above the study doorway last winter. I disguised it in an old smoke detector shell. Clever trick from my engineering days. It caught every sneaky step he took, recording crystal clear onto a hidden drive up in the attic. There he was on video, flashlight in hand, digging through my drawers like a raccoon in a trash can. Time-stamped, undeniable proof. He thought he was a ghost, slipping in and out unseen, but every frame screamed, "Gotcha!" I'd installed it after noticing small things missing around the house. Loose change, a watch I'd left on the counter. Figured it was him, testing the waters before going big. Now, with that footage, I had him cold. But I didn't play my hand yet. No, I let the tape roll, building my case like stacking bricks for a wall he'd crash into. He poked around again a couple nights later, same routine, clueless as ever. I reviewed the clips in the morning, sipping coffee, chuckling at his fumbling. Invisible? Hardly. He was lit up like a Christmas tree on that screen. The house felt thicker with secrets now, every creak a reminder. He was already snagged in my web, wriggling without knowing, and soon he'd catch himself. The day finally rolled around when my grandson strutted out in his interview clothes, pressed shirt, slacks, the works. He mumbled something about an errand in town, keys jingling in his pocket. I knew exactly where he was headed, the bank, with that swapped key burning a hole in his plans. From the window, I watched his car rumble down the driveway, dust kicking up like a bad omen. He probably grinned the whole way, dreaming of stacks of cash or whatever fairy tale he'd spun in his head. But reality waited in that metal box. No riches, just a folder fat with his mistakes, stolen credit card slips, accident reports he'd fudged, all neatly filed. He'd open it thinking jackpot, but it'd be like biting into an apple full of worms. Guilty as sin, fingerprints everywhere. I paced the living room, clock ticking slow, imagining his face when the truth hit. Would he sweat? Panic? Bolt? I almost felt a twinge of pity, but nah, he'd earned this ride. As an engineer, I'd built fail-safes into everything, and this was no different. The trap was primed, lock ready to turn. He thought freedom waited inside. Instead, chains. And I couldn't wait to hear the sound of the lock clicking open. Later that afternoon, my phone rang sharp and insistent. It was the bank manager, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Harlan who'd known me for years. "Mrs. Harlan here? Your grandson just showed up trying to get into your safe deposit box," she said, her voice laced with confusion. "He spun some yarn about acting on my behalf, papers in hand like he owned the place. But without my ID, she shut him down flat. The boy got red-faced, nearly blew his top right there in the lobby." I chuckled softly on my end, picturing his squirm. "If he comes back insisting, let him in," I told her. She paused, eyebrow probably shooting up like a rocket. "You sure? Bank policy." "I'm sure," I cut in calm. She agreed, though I could hear the bewilderment. What waited in that box wasn't for her to worry about. It was my ace in the hole, primed and ready. He'd march back in, key in hand, thinking victory was his, like a mouse eyeing cheese, ignoring the snap of the trap. As I hung up, the house felt electric with anticipation. He'd try again, no doubt. Greed like his doesn't quit easy. He thought he was about to win. He was about to lose everything. Inside that cold steel safe deposit box sat no glittering gold, no fat stacks of cash waiting to make him king. Instead, a thick manila folder bulged with the weight of truth, photos I'd snapped on the sly, showing him slipping credit cards from his mother's purse during family dinners, receipts from shady deals, pawn slips for items he'd sworn were lost, screenshots of texts I'd pulled from his old phone he thought I'd tossed, bragging about dodging blame for that car wreck he caused, pinning it on some poor sap who wasn't even there. He'd slide that key in, heart pounding with dollar signs in his eyes, flip open the lid like unwrapping a gift. But bam, his own face staring back from those pages, crimes laid bare like dirty laundry on the line. He'd be digging up not treasure, but a grave of his making. Every touch leaving smudges, proof he couldn't scrub away. Like a thief cracking a safe only to find a mirror showing his guilty mug. I sat at home, clock ticking, imagining the sweat beading on his brow. The bank was quiet, but his world was about to explode. He'd walk out changed, secrets clinging like burrs. And his fingerprints were now all over it. The bank manager called me back the next day, her voice hushed like she was sharing a secret. She'd let him in, as I'd asked, watching from the corner of her eye. My grandson slid the key in, popped the box open with that greedy gleam, thinking payday had arrived. But as he rifled through the folder, his face twisted, first all cocky, then puzzled, then pure terror washing over like a cold wave. Photos of his thieving hands, those damning receipts, text spilling his lies. He flipped pages faster, sweat beading, until he slammed it shut, muttering about the wrong box like a kid caught with candy. She said he bolted out white as a sheet, hands shaking. Too late, though. His grubby print smeared every page, sealing his fate tighter than a vault door. He didn't know the half of it yet. I'd engineered this moment, every wire and gear in place. Like a bridge collapsing under its own weight, his scheme was crumbling. I thanked her, hung up, and leaned back, heart thumping with that sweet rush. His downfall was locked in, fingerprints the key. But soon he'd realize I knew everything. That evening, we sat at the dinner table like statues in a museum. Him across from me, fork poking at his meatloaf like it was poison. Not a peep about the bank, the key, or his little adventure. He just stared at his plate, pushing peas around in circles, barely swallowing a bite. The clock ticked loud in the quiet, each second stretching like taffy. I dished up seconds for myself, humming an old tune, acting like it was any other night. But oh, I caught every twitch, his jaw clenching, eyes darting to me, then away, sweat on his brow even in the cool room. Inside, I savored it like fine whiskey, burning slow and warm. Paranoia was eating him alive, gnawing from the gut out, and I hadn't uttered a single accusing word. He squirmed, cleared his throat once, but nothing came. Like a fish on a hook, thrashing silent. The air thickened with unsaid truths, heavy as fog. He thought he could outsmart an old engineer? I'd built stronger traps in my sleep. Silence was driving him mad, and I wasn't finished yet. Late that night, as the house settled into darkness, I heard muffled voices through the thin walls of my bedroom. My grandson was in his room, whispering furiously into his phone, thinking the shadows hid his secrets. It was just papers, no money at all. Yeah, weird stuff about me. No, I don't know what to do next, he hissed, his voice cracking like thin ice underfoot. The person on the other end snapped back. I could hear the anger buzzing like a hornet's nest. You promised cash. Fix this, they barked. He shushed them, pacing, his footsteps creaking the floorboards. I lay still, ears straining, a grim smile tugging at my lips. He thought he was scheming in the dark, pulling strings behind my back like some puppet master. But every hushed word was another knot in the net I'd cast. Like a fish thrashing in shallow water, he was only tiring himself out. The pressure built, his whispers growing desperate, laced with fear. Whoever that caller was, buddy in crime maybe, a lender, he wasn't pleased, and that dissatisfaction echoed loud in the quiet house. Morning light would come, but the tension lingered like fog. He was unraveling thread by thread, and the next knock at our door would prove it. 2 days crawled by, thick with unspoken dread, when a sharp rap echoed at the front door. I opened it to find a stranger towering there, tall as a basketball pro, arms inked with swirling tattoos, eyes cold and piercing like winter steel. "Is Alex here?" he grunted, naming my grandson without a hello. "Got a job thing to discuss." His voice was gravelly, fake casual, but I smelled trouble like smoke from a hidden fire. I invited him in, all polite, offering a cup of tea from the kitchen. He waved it off, shifting on his feet, glancing around like he owned the place. That's when my grandson Alex shuffled in from the hall, face draining white as milk when our eyes met over the stranger's shoulder. He knew I'd clocked him together, this shady connection spilling into my clean home. Debt collector? Loan shark? Didn't matter. The boy's hidden world was leaking out, staining my doorstep like spilled oil. I kept my cool, chatting about the weather while they muttered in low tones, but inside resolve hardened like concrete. His messes wouldn't drag me down. I'd built my life sturdy. No way I'd let this rot seep in, and I wasn't about to let it stain my home. That night after the stranger left, I couldn't hold back anymore. I cornered my grandson Alex in the living room, not yelling about the key or the bank, but zeroing in on the shady folks he hung with. "That tattooed fellow who showed up? What's his deal? You bringing trouble to my door?" I asked, voice steady as a rock. He blew up like a firecracker on the 4th of July, face red, shouting that I was spying, meddling in his life like some nosy old coot. "You don't know nothing, Grandpa. Stay out," he hollered, veins popping in his neck. I didn't flinch, just sat there calm, letting his storm rage. Then, in the quiet after, I leaned in and said one line. "If you keep down this path, that box will destroy you." He barked a bitter laugh, trying to play tough, but I caught the flicker in his eyes, pure, raw fear, like a deer spotting a wolf in the woods. He had no clue how dead serious I was. That box held more than papers. It was a mirror to his soul, cracked and ugly. He stomped off to his room, slamming the door. But the air hummed with unfinished business, because that box wasn't finished with him yet. A week slunk by, tense as a coiled spring, and I got another call from the bank manager. Alex had snuck back in, used that swapped key again, and this time he walked out with the folder. Or so he thought. He'd snatched it clean, probably grinning like he'd outfoxed the fox. But here's the kicker. What he grabbed was a decoy, copies I'd planted just for this play. The real deal, those original photos, receipts, and texts proving his scams, sat safe in a fireproof case tucked under my bed, locked tighter than Fort Knox. I pictured him burning those fakes in some alley thinking he'd erased his tracks, covering up like a kid hiding cookie crumbs. But oh, he was just shoveling dirt on his own grave, deeper with every desperate move. I'd engineered it perfect, like wiring a circuit to short out at the right moment. He paced the house more now, eyes shifty, jumping at shadows. Paranoia nibbled at him constant, and I let it feast. Soon he'd slip up big, and that hole would yawn wide. Let him dig. I'd provide the shovel, and soon the hole he dug would swallow him whole. Over scrambled eggs and buttered toast that morning, my grandson Alex let it slip like a banana peel underfoot. He was poking at his food, mumbling half to himself, "As long as nobody ever finds out about that stuff." Then he froze solid, fork midway to his mouth, realizing I'd heard every word crystal clear. His eyes shot to mine, wide as saucers. But I just kept sipping my coffee, slow and steady, pretending to read the newspaper like it was the most fascinating thing since sliced bread. The room went quieter than a library at midnight, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Guilt gnawed at him faster than a starving dog on a bone. He barely touched his breakfast, hands starting to tremble like leaves in a breeze. He cleared his throat, tried to change the subject to the weather, but his voice cracked. I didn't say a peep, just let my silence hang there like a storm cloud, raining doubt all over his parade. He thought burning those papers had buried his troubles, but oh, he was wrong. I'd been playing this game longer than he'd been alive, always 2 moves ahead in the chess match of life. By the time he pushed back from the table, excuses tumbling out, I hid my smile behind the mug. And he didn't even know I was still 2 steps ahead. One crisp fall morning, with leaves crunching underfoot outside, a firm knock rattled my front door. I opened it to 2 police officers standing there, badges gleaming in the sun, faces serious as a heart attack. "Sir, we're looking into a stolen car report, and it traces back to your grandson," the taller one said, notepad in hand. They asked if I'd seen anything odd, if Alex had mentioned a joyride or shady deals. I raised my eyebrows high, feigning total confusion, shaking my head like a bewildered old-timer. "Stolen car? Goodness, no idea what that's about," I replied, inviting them in for coffee to play the hospitable host. They poked around a bit, asking questions, but I gave them nothing, just polite nods and vague shrugs. All the while, in my study down the hall, tucked in a locked drawer, sat that backup drive crammed with his secrets, videos from the camera, the real folder copies, everything time-stamped and ready. I wasn't handing it over yet. Timing is everything in a setup like this, like waiting for the perfect moment to pull the pin on a grenade. Alex peeked from the stairs, face pale as a ghost, but I waved him off casual-like. The cops left with promises to follow up, and the door clicked shut. But the air buzzed with unfinished business, because the right moment would ruin him completely. My grandson Alex turned into a wild animal caught in a trap, growing more frantic by the day. He'd vanish all night, stumbling home at dawn with eyes like saucers, red-rimmed and darting everywhere. Pace in the living room like a caged tiger, he'd muttered to himself, sweat beading on his forehead even in the cool air. Then came the begging. Oh, how he pleaded for cash, spinning yarns about rent for friends or some emergency bill. His lies were thinner than tissue paper, snapping apart if you poked them even a little. Like a house of cards in a breeze, they'd tumble fast. I sat there quiet, watching him unravel, and finally said, gentle as could be, "Maybe you ought to swing by the bank again, check that box one more time?" His face went ghost white, like I'd poured ice water down his back. He stammered excuses, backed away, but I saw it, the fear sinking deep, rooting in his gut like weeds in fertile soil. No more cocky grins, just a scared kid peeking through. The house felt heavier, shadows longer, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Suspense hung thick, waiting for the next shoe to drop. And I knew the fear had finally settled in. When Alex stormed back from the bank that second time, it was like a dam bursting wide open. He exploded, slamming doors so hard the pictures rattled on the walls, cursing up a blue streak that'd make a sailor blush. "You set me up, you old buzzard! This is all you're doing!" he yelled, voice cracking into sobs halfway through, tears mixing with the rage on his face. For the first time, I didn't see the slick manipulator who'd tried to rob me blind. No, just a terrified boy, jumping at his own shadow like it might bite. I stayed stone silent, setting in my armchair, letting his storm rage around me. Words would have dulled the edge. Quiet cut deeper, sharper than any knife. He paced, fists clenched, breath heaving, but my calm only fueled his fire, like poking a hornet's nest, but I was the one wearing the suit. He collapsed on the couch eventually, head in hands, the fight leaking out. The air crackled with unspoken truths, tension coiling tighter, ready to snap. He thought this was the end, but it was just heating up. But the family wasn't going to stay silent much longer. I picked up the phone and called my daughter, Alex's mom, asking her to swing by for a family chat. She arrived that afternoon, all smiles and hugs, clueless about the storm brewing. We settled in the living room, her on the couch, me in my armchair, Alex squirming in the corner like a worm on a hook. She chattered about work and weather, but I cut through it gentle. "There's something you need to see," I said, pulling open the desk drawer. Out came the real folder, thick with proof. The stolen credit cards from her purse, lies about that car crash, debts piling up like unpaid bills. I slid it across the coffee table to her, watching Alex's face drain whiter than fresh snow. She flipped through, eyes widening, hand to her mouth. "Alex, what's this?" she whispered, voice breaking. He shifted, mumbling nonsense, but the evidence stared back, cold and hard. No more hiding behind grins or excuses. The room shrank, air thick with betrayal, every tick of the clock pounding like a judge's gavel. He'd run out of shadows to duck into. There was nowhere left for him to hide. Cornered like a rat in a trap, Alex tried to spin his web of excuses. "Mom, it wasn't like that. The debt guys threatened me, said I'd get hurt if I didn't pay up," he stammered, voice shaky as a leaf in a gale. "I just wanted to borrow a bit from Grandpa's box, pay it back quick. Never meant to hurt nobody." His words tumbled out desperate, painting him as the victim, but the folder on the table screamed otherwise. His mom wept soft, tears streaming, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, heart breaking right there. I sat still as stone, letting each lie hang in the air like smoke from a dying fire, watching it choke him. Finally, he cracked wide open, whispering hoarse, "Grandpa set me up. He knew all along." And for the first time, I let a small smile crease my face, slow and knowing. He was right, spot on, the truth slipping from his lips like an accidental confession. The room pulsed with tension, her sobs mixing with his heavy breaths. No more games, the mask was off, because for once he was telling the truth. I leaned forward in my chair, eyes locked on Alex, and spilled the beans slow and steady. "I knew from the jump, boy. The second you swapped that key, I had you pegged," I said, voice calm as a summer lake. "I let you run with your sneaky plan, didn't lift a finger to stop it. See, I planted all that stuff in the box, not to snag your wallet, but to hook your conscience. Those papers, they're your mirror, showing every rotten choice you've made." He sat there stunned, mouth agape like a fish on dry land, while his mom gasped, hand over her heart. The room felt smaller, walls closing in like a vice grip, suspense hanging thick as fog off the bay. He tried to deny it, but words failed him. Guilt had him by the throat. No escape now. The trap I'd engineered snapped shut, precise as a watch gear. His downfall wasn't about cash or gold. It was the weight of his own bad calls crushing him down. Like a house built on sand, it all came tumbling, and every choice led him closer to the police station. His mom, tears streaming like a faucet left on, begged me on her knees for mercy. "Dad, please, one last shot for him. He's family, blood," she pleaded, voice cracking. I nodded slow, weighing it like an engineer checking blueprints. "All right, but on one condition." He marches down to the cops himself and spills every bean, comes clean about the thefts, the lies, the whole mess. Alex stared at me horrified, eyes bulging like he'd seen a ghost, realizing I wasn't joking around. He thought it was a bluff, some old man's empty threat, but my silence had already penned his fate, ink dry and final. The air crackled with tension, every breath heavy, like waiting for thunder after lightning. He paced, muttering no's, but deep down, he knew the jig was up. No more running. The path forked to confession or worse. I sat back, watching the storm brew in his head. He didn't get it. My quiet had been the real hammer, forging his end. Suspense built like a coiled spring, ready to pop, and the only pen left was in his hand. Alex trudged to the police station that very afternoon, legs shaking like jelly in an earthquake, sweat pouring down his back. He confessed it all. The stolen cards, the fudged accident, the debts to shady folks, spilling like a busted pipe. Not because guilt ate at him, no sir. It was pure fear I'd beat him there and lay it all out myself. The cops took notes, faces stern, and let him go with a warning to stay put while they investigated. He slunk back home hours later, head hung low, avoiding my eyes like I was the sun glaring too bright. I sat in my armchair, the safe deposit box now empty as a picked clean bone, its job done to perfection. No more secrets lurking. Everything aired out like laundry on a line. I hadn't wrecked him with my own hands, nah. I'd just handed over the rope, nice and coiled, and watched him knot it tight around his own neck, like teaching a lesson the hard way, engineer style. Build the trap, let him walk in. The house fell silent after. No more whispers or slams, just quiet ticking of the clock. He packed a bag quiet-like, moved out to his mom's. And that silence? It wrapped around me sweet as revenge pie, warm and satisfying. The old man won, fair and square. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also check out other videos on the channel. Joe's got more interesting stories for you.